Welcome to AmeenAcademy.com. Let us discuss about Ottoman Empire in World War One. The Ottoman entry into World War One began on 29th October 1914 when it launched the Black Sea raid against Russian ports. Following the attack, Russia declared war on the Ottoman Empire on 2nd November 1914, followed by their allies, that is Britain and France, declaring war on the Ottoman Empire on 5th November 1914. The Ottoman Empire started military action after 3 months of formal neutrality, but it had signed a secret alliance with the Central Powers in August 1914. The great landmass of Anatolia was between the Ottoman army's headquarters in Istanbul and many of the theaters of war. During Abdulhamid II's reign, civilian communications had improved, but the road and rail network was not ready for war. It took more than a month to reach Syria and nearly 2 months to reach Mesopotamia. To reach the border with Russia, the railway ran only 60 kilometers east of Ankara, and from there it was 35 days to Erzurum. The army used Trabzon port as a logistical shortcut to the east. It took less time to arrive at any of those fronts from London than from the Ottoman War Department because of the poor condition of Ottoman supply ships. The empire fell into disorder with the declaration of war along the Germany. On 11th November, a conspiracy was discovered in Constantinople against Germans and Committee of Union and Progress, that is CUP, in which some of the CUP leaders were shot. That followed the 12th November revolt in Adrianople against the Germany military mission. On November 13, a bomb exploded in Enver Pasha's palace, which killed 5 German officers but failed to kill Enver Pasha. On 18 November, there were more anti-German plots. Committees formed around the country to rid the country of those who sided with Germany. Army and Navy officers protested against the assumptions of authority by Germans. On 4th December, widespread marches took place throughout the country. On 13th December, an anti-war demonstration was led by women in Konak and Erzurum. Throughout December, the CUP dealt with mutiny among soldiers in barracks and among naval crews. The head of the German military missions, Field Marshal von der Goltz, survived a conspiracy against his life. Let us discuss further about Ottoman Empire in World War One. The Ottoman entry into World War One began on 29th October 1914 when it launched the Black Sea raid against Russia ports. Following the attack, Russia declared war on the Ottoman Empire on 2nd November, followed by their allies, Britain and France, declaring war on the Ottoman Empire on 5th November 1914. This already discussed. The Ottoman Empire was central power in World War One, fighting alongside the German Empire, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria. The Ottoman Empire's involvement in the war had many consequences, including entry into the war. The Ottoman Empire entered the war on October 29, 1914. After launching a surprise attack on Russia's Black Sea coast, Russia responded by declaring war on November 1, 1914. and Britain and France declared war on the Ottoman Empire on November 5, 1940. The war aims. The Ottoman Empire's war aims were to survive in the short term and gain independence and security in the long term. The Ottoman Empire's military strategy was to draw enemy forces away from the Western Front, where Germany and its allies would eventually win the war. War outcomes. The Ottoman Empire was defeated in the war in 1918. The empire's defeat led to its dissolution in 1922, when the title of Ottoman Sultan was eliminated. The majority of Ottoman territories were divided between Britain, France, Greece, and Russia. Armenian genocide. The Armenian genocide campaign of deportation and mass killing conducted against the Armenian subjects of the Ottoman Empire by the Young Turk government during World War I. Armenians charged that the campaign was a deliberate attempt to destroy the Armenian people and thus an act of genocide. The Turkish government has resisted calls to recognize it as such, contending that although atrocities took place, where there was no official policy of extermination implemented against the Armenian people as a group. The Ottoman Empire was one of the mightiest and longest lasting dynasties in the world history. The Islamic run superpower ruled large areas of Middle East, Eastern Europe, and North Africa for more than 600 years. The chief leader, known as the Sultan, was given absolute religious and political authority over his people, while Western Europeans generally viewed them as a threat. Many historians regard the Ottoman Empire as a source of great regional stability and security, as well as important achievements in the arts, science, religion, and culture. At the height, the Ottoman Empire included the following regions. Many regions: Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Egypt, Hungary, Macedonia, Romania, Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Hungary, Mesopotamia, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, some of Arabia, a considerable amount of North African coastal tribes. When Ottoman Empire entered the war by a naval bombardment of Russian Black Sea ports on 29 October 1914, its army had already undergone a hasty reorganization and a series of reforms following its catastrophic defeat in the First Balkan War. Along with the officers who were deemed opponent of the Committee of Union and Progress, that is CUP, elderly officers who were held responsible for the Balkan disaster had been forced into entertainment and a rejuvenated but less experienced officers' corps and had emerged. General mobilization, which was declared on 2nd August 1914, had not been properly planned or coordinated. This caused massive delays in units reaching their full strength before the hostilities began. The army initially fielded 13 army corps and two independent divisions. These units were organized into four field armies. The first and second armies were deployed on both sides of the Bosphorus to protect the capital, its vicinity. Thrace and the Aegean coast. The Third Army was deployed in eastern Anatolia on the Russian border, and the Fourth Army was deployed along the coast of Syria and Palestine. In Mesopotamia, the Iraq area command was created with an understaffed and ill-equipped infantry divisions, supported with gendarmerie and tribal forces. It was entrusted with the defense of vast area stretching from the Persian Gulf to Mosul. the Ottoman High Command, lacking any kind of clear war goals after then enjoying the potential benefits of a great power alliances at the end of the war, had relied almost completely on German military planners for its strategic and operational level planning. The Ottoman campaign and concentration plans were drawn up in accordance with German strategic needs on the Western Front. As the war progressed, it became apparent that the Ottoman Empire would be fighting for its own survival. The major engagements took place in the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, Gallipoli, and Palestine, but the army also saw action in secondary fronts such as Yemen, Asir, Hejaz, Iran, Galicia, Romania, and Macedonia. The Caucasus Campaign. Shortly after the hostilities began, the Ottoman General Staff decided to launch a large scale winter offensive that would encircle the annihilate the Russian army in the Caucasus. For the operation, Minister of War Enver Pasha in 1881 to 1922 personally arrived at the front and assumed the command of the Third Army himself. The plan devised by Enver Pasha himself was to conduct a single envelopment of the Russian right flank and strike the main body of the Russian army in Sarikamis. During the planning of the operation, however, weather conditions, rough terrain, potential logistical problems, and the lack of heavy artillery support had been widely ignored. Enver Pasha, though an able staff officer and a proven expert in irregular warfare, had no practical experience in commanding an army, let alone in leading such a large-scale operations. These factors all combined would decide the fate of the campaign. The offensive started on 22nd December, catching the Russians off guard, but in a little more than 2 weeks, it came to a halt and was eventually pushed back by Russians' counterattacks. The Third Army suffered terribly due to uncoordinated assaults caused by poor leadership and forced marches in extreme weather conditions. At the end of the operations, the Third Army's manpower had been reduced from 42,000 to 11,000, 42,000 to from 118,000 to 42,000. To make things worse for the Ottomans, the spring of 1915 saw the Armenian upspring in Van, which spread like wildfire and compromised the army's rear area security. This led to Istanbul's controversial decision to forcibly relocate the Armenian population of Anatolia. The Russians, after regaining their strength and receiving reinforcement, launched a series of offensives throughout 1915, capturing Van, Malazgirt, and finally the fortress city of Erzurum in early 1916. By spring 1916, the situation got extremely critical as the Russians captured the Black Sea ports of Rais and Trabzon. The Second Army in the Thrace was reorganized and hastily deployed on the Third Army right flank. The two armies failed to coordinate their operations during the Russian offensives targeting the Third Army front in July 1916, which led to the fall of Erzincan. When it was the Second Army's return to launch a large-scale offensive, which was to be the Ottoman Army's very last major offensive in the war. On 2nd August 1916, it received no support from the Third Army and suffered terribly casualties. Later, the Second and Third Armies were assigned under the command of the newly created Caucasian army group, thus ending the coordination problem of those two armies. In 1917, because of the political turmoil in Russia, combat in eastern Anatolia calmed down, and in late 1917, after the Bolshevik Revolution, the Russians asked for a truce. Exploiting this strategic pause, in early 1918, the Third Army began an offensive to capture eastern Anatolian territories under a Russian occupation and reach the Russo-Ottoman border of 1877. Apart from weak resistance from Armenian units, the Russians simply moved out of the Third Army's way. The ease and swiftness of the Third Army's success encouraged Enver Pasha to commit more units to the Caucasus campaign to invade the entire Caucasus and Iran. In the summer of 1918, the Ninth Army was activated to move into the Iran while the Third Army operated in Georgia and Azerbaijan. These two armies were united under the command of the Eastern Army Group. In September 1918, the Third Army reached the Caspian Sea and captured Baku. Meanwhile, the Ninth Army moved into Iran, captured Tabriz, and reached as far as the north of Sulaymaniyah. These two armies would occupy those territories until the armistice. Now we'll continue in next video about the Ottoman Empire in First World War. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.